poor girl accidentally grabbed the cold billionaire CEO's sensitive spot. What he did next left her speechless. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The crystal chandelier above the Grand Meridian Hotel lobby glimmered like 1,000 tiny suns. The scent of champagne and expensive perfume floated through the air. Waiters in pressed uniforms moved in a blur, balancing silver trays, while guests in glittering gowns and tailored suits laughed under the soft music. Among them rushed Lina Carter, her second-hand shoes squeaking faintly against the marble floor. She clutched a tray of champagne flutes, heart racing as she wove between the guests. The company hosting the charity gala had promised a bonus to the staff who made it through the night without a single mistake. For Lina, that meant everything. Her mother's hospital bill was due in 3 days. Table 6, table 6, she whispered under her breath, eyes scanning the crowd. She turned a corner, then it happened. A sudden jolt, a slick patch on the marble, and her tray tilted. The glasses wobbled, catching the golden light before crashing to the floor in a sharp, ringing sound. Gasps rippled through the room. Champagne sprayed across her apron. Lina stumbled forward, reaching out instinctively to steady herself. Her trembling hand landed on someone's waist. The man froze. She looked up, mortified, straight into the cool gray eyes of Adrian Cole, the host of the event, the billionaire CEO of Cole Enterprises. His expression was unreadable, carved in stone, his black tuxedo untouched by the spill. The murmurs around them grew louder. A dozen camera phones discreetly lifted. I am so sorry, sir. Lina's voice shook as she stepped back, cheeks burning. She tried to bow, tried to gather the fallen glasses, but her hands were shaking too badly. Adrian said nothing. He only studied her for a moment, eyes narrowing slightly. She looked like she could disappear under the weight of her own humiliation. Wet apron, flushed face, strands of hair sticking to her cheeks. Finally, he reached into his pocket, took out a crisp white handkerchief, and offered it to her. Are you hurt? His tone was calm, deep, and cold as marble. Lina blinked, startled by the question. No, sir. I did not see. He cut her off gently. Accidents happen. Clean yourself up. Then he turned away, his stride slow and deliberate, as if the small chaos she had caused barely touched his evening. The moment he walked off, the whispers began. She grabbed his waist. Is she crazy? That is Adrian Cole. He fired an entire team for spilling coffee last year. Lina crouched on the floor, picking up shards of glass with trembling fingers. Each piece felt heavier than it should. A drop of blood welled up on her fingertip, but she ignored it. Her chest ached, not from the cut, but from the certainty that her job was over. Back in the service hallway, her coworker Maya hissed, Girl, that was him, the Adrian Cole. You are lucky he did not have you escorted out. Lina leaned against the wall, breathing hard. He looked right at me, she whispered. I thought he was going to fire me on the spot, but he had not. Instead, his voice, low and calm, still echoed in her head. Are you hurt? It was the first time in years anyone at an event like that had asked her a question that sounded human. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the chandeliers dimmed, Lina sat alone in the locker room. She opened her worn sketchbook, its pages smudged with pencil drawings of faces she had seen but could never reach. At the center of the latest page, she began sketching a man in a tuxedo, his expression distant, untouchable, yet somehow kind. She did not know that the same man, Adrian Cole, was standing in his private suite upstairs, staring out at the glittering skyline, replaying the scene in his mind. He was not used to being touched, not by accident, not by anyone. But the way she had looked up at him, startled, terrified, real, had lingered longer than he expected. He did not know her name yet, but somehow, he could still feel the warmth of her hand against his waist. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds of Lina's small apartment, landing on the stack of unpaid bills scattered across her table. Her mother's medical invoice lay on top, circled in red. Lina rubbed her tired eyes, the memory of the previous night replaying in her head like a nightmare. She could not wake from the shattering glass, the gas, and the moment her hand landed on Adrian Cole's waist. She let out a shaky sigh. Just one mistake, she whispered. Just one mistake and they will fire me. Her phone buzzed. A message from the hotel manager appeared on the screen. Come in early today. We need to talk. Her stomach sank. At the Grand Meridian, she slipped into her uniform, tied her apron, and walked into the staff office. Mr. Grant, the manager, stood behind his desk, his expression unreadable. Lina, he said, folding his hands. Last night was unfortunate. I know, sir, I am so sorry. I will pay for the broken glasses if I need to. Please, just let me. He raised a hand to stop her. Mr. Cole called this morning. Her breath caught. He did? He asked for your name, Mr. Grant continued. Said he wanted to make sure you were not fired. Lina blinked, stunned. He did what? The manager's tone softened slightly. He told me accidents happen. That was all. You still have your job. But please, be more careful next time. She nodded quickly, relief flooding through her chest. When she stepped out of the office, her co-workers were whispering again. She must have done something to charm him, one said. Nobody talks to Mr. Cole without trembling. Lina ignored them and went back to polishing glasses. Her hands still shook a little, but inside her heart was lighter. For the first time in months, someone had defended her. That evening, when her shift ended, she walked home through the cool New York air. The streetlights reflected off puddles, and the noise of the city hummed softly around her. She passed a bookstore window and caught her reflection. Hair messy, apron stained, eyes tired but alive. At home, she opened her sketchbook again. On the corner of a new page, she drew a man's silhouette looking out over a city skyline. Underneath, she wrote a single line. Even cold hearts can show kindness. Across town, in a glass tower that touched the clouds, Adrian Cole sat at his desk, a report open but unread. His assistant had mentioned that the hotel staff girl had been kept on, per his request. It should have been a closed matter. But he found himself wondering why he had cared enough to intervene. He told himself it was nothing, just fairness. Still, his mind replayed the way she had bowed her head, the small cut on her finger, the quiet panic in her eyes. He leaned back in his chair, watching the city lights blur through the window. Are you hurt? The words he had said echoed faintly in his memory. They sounded too gentle for him, too human. The following week, fate twisted again. During a midday inspection of a small cafe chain his company owned, Adrian walked in quietly, dressed down in a simple shirt and dark jeans. The barista behind the counter looked up and froze. Lina nearly dropped the coffee cup in her hand. Their eyes met for the second time. He smiled faintly, as if recognizing her from a dream. Looks like you did not spill anything today. Her breath caught, heat rushing to her cheeks. You remember me? Adrian nodded once. I do. He rested his hands on the counter, studying her with the same calm intensity as before. And I think we should start over. No broken glasses this time. Lina hesitated, unsure whether to laugh or hide. But as she met his gaze, something inside her softened. For the first time, his voice did not sound cold, it sounded almost warm. And that was how the second chapter of their story quietly began. Lina could not believe she was talking to him again. The same man who had made her heart stop with a single look now stood before her, dressed casually, without the armor of a billionaire CEO. In daylight, Adrian Cole looked different, less untouchable, more human. Still, she could feel the weight of who he was in the quiet confidence of his voice. Would you like to sit? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The cafe is not too busy this morning. He nodded and took a corner seat near the window. She brought him a cup of cappuccino, her hands trembling slightly. On the house, she said. He looked up at her. You should not do that. Company policy, remember? Lina smiled nervously. Consider it an apology. I promise not to spill this one. A small chuckle escaped his lips, and for a moment the sharp lines of his face softened. All right then, he said quietly. Apology accepted. She was about to leave when he asked, Do you draw during your breaks? Her heart skipped. How do you know that? He set his cup down, the ghost of a smile tugging at his mouth. You dropped your sketchbook that night at the hotel. I picked it up before one of the waiters swept it away. Lina froze. You saw it? I did, he said simply. You have talent. You see people the way most do not. Color rose to her cheeks. It is just a hobby, something to keep me from falling apart. Adrian tilted his head, curiosity glinting in his gray eyes. What do you want to do with it? She hesitated, then whispered, "Someday, I want to open a small cafe where people can sit and paint, a place where no one has to dress rich to feel welcome." He studied her for a long moment, as though weighing the sincerity in every word. "That sounds beautiful." Their conversation stretched longer than she expected. They talked about art, about the city, about how expensive everything felt for people who had so little. Adrian listened more than he spoke, his tone softer than anyone in his boardroom would recognize. When he finally stood to leave, he placed a few bills on the counter, far more than the price of a coffee. She frowned. "Sir, that is too much." He met her gaze and said, "Consider it an investment." Then he walked out into the sunlight, leaving her wondering if she had just imagined the whole thing. That evening, Lina told her friend Maya what had happened. Maya's eyes widened. "You talked to Adrian Cole? The Adrian Cole? Girl, this is not a fairy tale. He probably visits dozens of stores like that." "I know," Lina murmured. "But he remembered my name." The next few days blurred into each other. Lina kept working, sketching during her breaks, pretending she was fine. But sometimes, she would catch herself looking at the door, half expecting him to appear again. And one afternoon, he did. Adrian returned wearing the same quiet smile. "I was nearby," he said simply. "Thought I would see how your coffee tastes a second time." Lina laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "Still no broken cups. I am improving." As she poured his drink, her hand brushed against his for a second, just a quick, accidental touch, but enough to make her heart stumble. He did not pull away. "Good," he said softly. "Keep improving. You never know who might be watching." When he left, Lina stared at the sketch she had started that morning of a man standing in sunlight, one hand resting casually on the counter, his eyes unreadable yet kind. She smiled to herself, not knowing that the man in her drawing was already thinking about her too. Up in his office that night, Adrian opened his phone and scrolled through the hotel's charity event photos, and there she was in the background, laughing with another waitress, holding a tray too big for her hands. He paused, tracing the image with his thumb. He told himself it was nothing. But deep down, something inside him had already begun to change. The following week, the cafe felt brighter than usual. The morning sunlight spilled across the floorboards, and the smell of roasted coffee beans wrapped around the room like a warm blanket. Lina wiped the counter, pretending not to glance at the door every few minutes. It had been 3 days since Adrian's last visit, and somehow that silence felt heavier than she expected. When the door finally opened, she looked up too quickly and almost dropped the cup in her hand. But this time, it was not him, just another customer. She laughed at herself quietly. "Get a grip, Lina," she whispered. "He is a billionaire. You are just a barista." Her manager's voice broke her thoughts. "Lina, a man just called asking for you. Said he wants to meet at the park near Fifth Avenue. He did not leave a name, just said you would know who he was." Lina's heart skipped. She knew that voice, that calm certainty. Adrian Cole. That afternoon, she walked to the park with her sketchbook tucked under her arm. The city breeze was cool, carrying the scent of rain and roasted nuts from a nearby cart. She found him sitting on a bench under an elm tree, his suit jacket draped over one arm, his tie loosened. For the first time, he looked almost ordinary. "You came," he said quietly, standing as she approached. "I was not sure if I should," Lina admitted. "I do not really belong in your world." Adrian smiled faintly. "Neither do I, most days." He motioned for her to sit. "I wanted to thank you for the coffee, and for the conversation." Lina tilted her head. "You do not seem like the type who thanks people often." In 17-2 Masons, he gave a low chuckle. "You are right. I usually do not. But you are different. You do not treat me like I am a name on a magazine cover." She looked down, tracing the edge of her sketchbook with her thumb. "That is because I did not know who you were when I met you." "Exactly," he said softly. "And for some reason, that makes me want to talk to you more." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the city. A child laughed somewhere near the fountain. A street musician began to play a slow, sweet tune on a violin. Adrian leaned forward slightly. "What do you draw when you are not working?" "Faces mostly," she replied. "People I see but will never meet again." She hesitated, then opened her sketchbook. On one of the pages was a drawing of the hotel lobby the night of the gala, with his figure turned slightly away, the broken glass glittering around him. He stared at it for a long time, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You made that chaos look beautiful." "I draw what I remember," she said softly. And that night, it changed things for me. Adrian nodded, his jaw tightening slightly. It changed things for me too. He stood then, slipping his hands into his pockets. I have a question, Lina. Would you ever sell your work? She blinked. Sell? No one would buy it. Maybe not no one, he said with a small smile. I know a gallery owner who owes me a favor. He would love to showcase something like this. Her breath caught. You cannot be serious. I am always serious, Adrian said. Send me 5 pieces by Friday. Let me handle the rest. She wanted to protest, to remind him that people like her did not belong in galleries, but his expression was calm, steady, and completely sure. I will think about it, she said finally. Good, he replied, because I do not give up easily. As he walked away, Lina watched him disappear into the crowd. For the first time, she felt the strange pull of two worlds, slowly beginning to collide, his world of glass towers and her world of small sketches. And she could not help but wonder if fate had made her spill that champagne for a reason. 3 days later, Lina sat at her small kitchen table, surrounded by sketches. The faint buzz of the city came through her cracked window as she carefully selected 5 drawings, the ones that felt most honest. Her fingers trembled as she slid them into a folder. She still could not believe Adrian Cole had asked for them. By Friday morning, she stood outside the tall glass building that bore his name. Cole Enterprises shimmered against the skyline, the kind of place people like her only saw from a distance. She hesitated at the entrance, clutching her folder to her chest. When she finally walked in, her reflection stretched across the marble floor, fragile but determined. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile. Miss Lina Carter? Mr. Cole is expecting you. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, the view took her breath away. His office overlooked the entire city, endless windows, sunlight spilling across the polished floor. And there he was, standing by the glass, hands in his pockets. Right on time, Adrian said, turning toward her. His voice was calm, but his eyes softened when they met hers. You brought them? She nodded and handed him the folder. I hope they are what you wanted. He opened it, flipping through each piece slowly. One sketch caught his attention, the one of the park bench where they had talked. His lips curved slightly. You even drew me. Videos and Anna Lifeine. Her face flushed. I draw what I remember, she said quietly. Then I am honored, he replied, setting the folder down. These are better than I expected. Better than you expected from a waitress? She asked with a nervous laugh. Adrian met her gaze without hesitation. Better than I expected from anyone. For a moment the air between them felt charged, silent but alive. He gestured toward the window. Come here. I want to show you something. Lina stepped beside him. The city stretched endlessly below tiny people, cars like silver dots. It is beautiful, she whispered. It is, Adrian said, but sometimes it feels lonely up here. Everyone sees the glass towers and thinks they mean success. They never see the emptiness. She looked up at him, surprised by the quiet sadness in his voice. You sound like someone who needs a break from his own life. Maybe I do, he admitted. Maybe that is why I came to that cafe. Lina smiled softly. You could go anywhere in the world, and yet you ended up in a place that sells $5 coffee. That coffee, he said, glancing at her, was worth every cent. She laughed, the sound light and unguarded. It filled the room in a way that made Adrian's shoulders ease. After a pause, he said, There is a charity event next week at the Meridian. My foundation is sponsoring it. I would like you to come. Some of your work might even be displayed there. Her heart skipped. Me? I do not belong at events like that. You belong wherever your art belongs, he said simply. And it belongs there. When she left his office, the sunlight felt warmer somehow. She walked down the street with her sketchbook hugged tightly against her chest, a small smile on her face. That evening, she returned to the cafe for her shift. Maya caught the look on her face immediately. Okay, spill it, her friend teased. You look like you just walked out of a dream. Maybe I did, Lina said softly. Or maybe it is just beginning. Across town, Adrian sat at his desk again, flipping through her drawings one last time. He paused at the one of himself in the park. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, not control, not calculation, but a quiet sense of hope. He closed the folder, staring out at the city lights that glowed like stars. Somewhere down there, she was probably sketching again. And he realized, without meaning to, he wanted to be part of her next drawing. The night of the charity gala arrived faster than Lina expected. Her hands shook slightly as she zipped the back of her borrowed navy blue dress. It was simple but elegant, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could walk into a room without apologizing for existing. Maya had lent her a pair of silver heels and whispered, "Remember, chin up. You deserve to be there as much as anyone else." The Grand Meridian sparkled just as it had the night she first met Adrian. Only this time, she was not carrying a tray, she was walking through the front doors as a guest. The air buzzed with laughter, music, and the clink of crystal glasses. On the far wall, a small section was dedicated to the art exhibition. Her sketches hung in simple white frames under the soft golden lights. When Lina saw her name printed beneath them, Lina Carter, local artist, her eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth, whispering to herself, "It is real. This is actually happening." "Congratulations," a deep voice said behind her. She turned and there he was, Adrian Cole, in a tailored black suit, looking at her with quiet pride. "You did all of this?" he said softly. "Not me," she smiled shyly. "You gave me the chance. That is what matters." He studied her for a moment before saying, "I gave you a door. You had the courage to walk through it." Before she could respond, the announcer's voice filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of tonight's charity event, Mr. Adrian Cole." The crowd turned toward the stage. Lina stepped aside as Adrian took the microphone. His voice, firm yet calm, carried across the ballroom. "Tonight is about second chances," he said. "Not just for those we help, but for all of us. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change a life, even our own." As he spoke, his gaze found her across the room. For a moment, it felt as if the hundreds of guests disappeared, and it was just the two of them, the man who lived among the clouds and the girl who once spilled champagne at his feet. After the applause, Adrian stepped down from the stage and joined her again. "Would you like to dance?" he asked. She blinked in surprise. "Dance? I am not sure I remember how." "Then I will lead," he said, offering his hand. The orchestra began to play a soft melody. She hesitated for only a second before placing her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, and completely unlike the cold image the world knew. As they moved slowly across the floor, Lina's nerves melted away. "I still cannot believe I am here," she whispered. "A few months ago, I was cleaning tables in this very room. And tonight," he said gently, "you are the reason this room feels alive. And it's Shapper. In Fran." Lina looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the chandeliers above. "Why me, Adrian? Out of everyone. Why did you help me?" He smiled faintly. "Because the night you thought you ruined everything, you reminded me what it meant to be human." Her breath caught at his words. Before she could say anything else, the music faded, and the crowd broke into applause. Later, as the evening wound down, Lina slipped outside onto the balcony for air. The city lights shimmered below, and the cool wind brushed her hair. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Adrian approaching. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly. "You changed something in me, and I do not want tonight to be the last time I see you." Lina held his gaze, her heart beating fast. "It does not have to be," she said softly. For the first time since she had met him, Adrian smiled without restraint, real, unguarded, and warm. Down below, the city kept moving, unaware that somewhere above its glittering skyline, two lives had just taken a turn neither of them had ever planned. The following days felt like a dream Lina could not quite hold on to. After the gala, articles began to appear online. Local artist, discovered by CEO Adrian Cole. Photos of her sketches, her smile, and even a picture of them dancing circulated across social media. At first, she laughed about it, but soon, the whispers started. At the cafe, her coworkers stared. One of them said, half joking but sharp, "So, how does it feel to be the billionaire's favorite charity case?" Lina froze, forcing a polite smile. "It is not like that." But the look on their faces said they did not believe her. By the time she got home that night, her phone buzzed with messages, strangers calling her lucky, others accusing her of using him for fame. The weight of it all pressed on her chest. She did not ask for this attention. She had only drawn what she loved. Meanwhile, in his high-rise office, Adrian faced questions from his board of directors. "Sir," one of them said cautiously, "the tabloids are running wild. They are suggesting personal involvement with the girl from the hotel staff." Should we issue a statement? Adrian leaned back, his expression unreadable. No statement. The truth needs no defense. Still, the headlines grew louder. Cold CEO and secret relationship? From waitress to muse. The next afternoon, Lina went to deliver coffee orders to one of Cole Enterprises' departments, a temporary contract she had taken to make extra money. She walked through the glass doors only to hear two executives whispering near the elevator. She probably planned it from the start, one of them said. The spilled champagne, the drawings, it is all too convenient. Lina stopped in her tracks. The words hit harder than she expected. Her throat tightened. She turned to leave but came face to face with Adrian. Lina? His voice softened when he saw her expression. What happened? Nothing, she said quickly. I should go. He reached out gently, stopping her. Tell me. She shook her head, her voice trembling. They are saying I used you, that I made a fool out of you. And the worst part is, they will never believe otherwise, because you are you, and I am just me. Adrian's eyes darkened. You do not have to justify yourself to anyone, but I do, she said, stepping back. Because this, whatever it is between us, cannot survive your world. You live in glass towers, and I am the girl who cleans the floors beneath them. He took a step closer. Lina, listen to me. No, she interrupted, tears filling her eyes. I should have known better. I do not belong there. I never did. She turned and walked out before he could say another word. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, the city lights flickering outside her window. Her sketchbook lay open on the table, but she could not draw. Every line felt heavy, every page hollow. For the first time, art, the thing that always saved her, felt meaningless. Across town, Adrian stood in the empty ballroom of the Grand Meridian, staring at the spot where they had danced. His reflection in the glass looked tired, haunted. For years, he had built walls around himself, and just when someone had managed to break through, he had watched her walk away. His phone buzzed with another message from the press, but he ignored it. Instead, he whispered into the quiet, I am not letting this end here. When Selvakanagai, Lina might have walked away, but Adrian Cole was not the kind of man who gave up on what truly mattered. Not anymore. Days turned into weeks, and the world slowly moved on, but Adrian did not. Every morning, he passed by the cafe near his office, hoping to see her behind the counter again. She never was. Every evening, he opened her folder of sketches, tracing the lines of her drawings as if they held the answers he could not find. The silence she left behind felt louder than anything else in his life. Lina had quit her job at the cafe and taken shifts at a small art supply store across town. The pay was lower, but the quiet helped her breathe again. She told herself she had done the right thing, that distance would make the pain fade. Yet every time she picked up a pencil, her hand hesitated. She had once drawn to feel alive. Now every page reminded her of him. One rainy afternoon, as she was closing the shop, she noticed a large envelope taped to the door. There was no name on it, only a single handwritten note, for the girl who taught me what real art looks like. Inside were several glossy photos, her drawings, framed and displayed in a real gallery downtown. At the bottom of the envelope was a small invitation card embossed with silver ink. The Art of Lina Carter, opening night. Her heart stopped. She stared at the invitation, barely able to breathe. The gallery was scheduled to open that evening. Without thinking, she locked the shop, grabbed her coat, and ran into the rain. When she arrived, the lights inside the gallery glowed through the misty windows. People were already gathered, critics, artists, and strangers admiring her work. The walls were lined with her sketches, every single one she had ever given Adrian, and a few she had never shown anyone. Her throat tightened as she realized he must have kept copies of them all. At the center of the room stood Adrian Cole, dressed simply, without his usual armor of wealth or status. When he saw her at the entrance, he smiled a real quiet smile that reached his eyes. You did this? She whispered as she walked closer, her voice trembling. I only made the calls, he said. You made the art. Why would you go through all this trouble after everything that happened? Because I was wrong, Adrian said simply. I thought I could live behind walls. I thought protecting my reputation mattered more than being honest about how I felt. But then I realized, what good is success if you cannot share it with the one person who made you feel human again? Lina blinked back tears. Adrian, you do not owe me anything. He shook his head gently. This is not about debt. It is about choice. I am choosing to make things right. The crowd began to applaud as a reporter announced the start of the event. Adrian took her hand and led her to the center of the room, in front of a large canvas draped in white cloth. "There is one last piece you should see," he said softly. He pulled the cloth away, revealing a framed sketch, the first one she had ever drawn of him, the night she spilled the champagne. Beneath it, a small brass plate read, "The moment that changed everything." Lina covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. "You kept it?" "I kept all of it," he said, "because it reminded me that even the worst mistake can be the start of something good." The crowd faded from her mind. All she could see was him standing there, unguarded, his voice steady, his heart open. And in that instant, she realized he was not the cold CEO everyone saw. He was the man who had quietly believed in her when no one else did. Lina smiled through her tears. "Then maybe it is time we start over." Adrian nodded, his fingers tightening gently around hers. "No broken glasses this time," she laughed softly. "Just second chances." And as the room filled with applause, they stood together beneath her art, both of them finally ready to begin again. The gallery lights dimmed slowly as the evening came to an end. Guests began to leave with warm smiles, still talking about the story of the unknown artist whose drawings had moved an entire room. Lina stood beside Adrian, her hand still in his, the sound of quiet music echoing softly around them. She could hardly believe what had just happened. Her dream had come true, and it had happened because one man refused to let her story end in silence. When the last visitor left, the two of them walked out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, and the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement like stars fallen to earth. For a long moment, they simply stood there, side by side, watching the reflections dance. "I do not think I have ever seen you smile this much," Adrian said softly. Lina laughed quietly. "Maybe that is because I finally have something real to smile about." She looked up at him. "You did all of this, Adrian? You turned my mistakes into something beautiful." He shook his head gently. "No, Lina. You did that yourself. All I did was finally pay attention." They began walking down the quiet street together. For the first time, she noticed how different he seemed. Less guarded, more alive. The man who once hid behind his wealth now looked like someone who had finally found peace. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked. "The one at the hotel?" He smiled faintly. "Every day. It was the moment everything started to change." Lina chuckled softly. "I still cannot believe I grabbed your waist in front of everyone." "I can," he said with a teasing glint in his eye. "It was the first honest thing that had happened to me in years." She laughed again, and the sound filled the night. They reached the corner where her small cafe dream had first been born, in words and sketches and impossible hopes. Adrian stopped and turned to her. "I have been thinking," he said. "The city could use a place like the one you described, a cafe where everyone belongs. What do you say we build it together?" "One hint for marrying Rafis." Her eyes widened. "Together?" "Yes," he said. "Not as a project, not as charity, as partners, as equals." Tears gathered in her eyes, but this time they were from joy. "Second Chances Cafe," she whispered, remembering the name she had once written on the first page of her sketchbook. He nodded. "Exactly that." Months later, the sign "Second Chances Cafe" hung above the door of a cozy corner shop filled with art, laughter, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Paintings by local artists covered the walls, and at the center stood a framed drawing of two hands, almost touching, one rough from work, one elegant but human. Underneath it, a small inscription read, "The mistake that started everything." Lina walked through the cafe, greeting customers, her heart full. When she turned toward the window, she saw Adrian outside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He stepped in, the morning sunlight spilling across his face, and handed one to her. "For the artist who changed my life," he said with a smile. She smiled back, her fingers brushing his. "And for the man who taught me that kindness can break through even the coldest heart." He leaned in slightly. "So, what now?" Lina looked around the cafe, the people laughing, the art glowing on the walls, and then back at him. "Now," she said softly, "we build something that lasts." Adrian took her hand, and together they looked out at the city beyond the glass. The same city that had once kept them apart now shimmered like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. As the camera of life panned out, her laughter blending with his quiet chuckle, the sign above their cafe glowed in the fading light. "Second Chances Cafe, where every mistake has a story." And for Lina and Adrian, That story had only just begun.